Welcome to our next video. Basically, this is going to cover system setup and campaign principles. So things that you need to keep in mind when you're creating campaign. In the next video, we'll get into the nitty gritty of how to create your first campaign, how to do it for candidates, how to do it for clients, etc., etc. That's all coming. But at this point, I just want to give you an overview of how you would set up your first campaign very briefly and some of the things to keep in mind as you're doing it. So the first step that you would do when you want to set up a new campaign, you need to connect your LinkedIn account, which happens like so. This basically just opens a kind of a mini browser window into your actual kind of the place where you would log into LinkedIn usually. Because what we're doing is we're setting up another iteration. So this is using a designated IP, which is linked to your location to allow you to log in. And then once it's logged in, it'll come up as here as saying connected. You can also connect your Twitter account. Now this isn't like compulsory, you don't have to do it. And in fact, I'm not sure how much extra actual benefit there is to it, but it allows you to connect on Twitter as well every time they have a Twitter profile. It basically, the whole point of Twitter is to allow for a more organic footprint. It's done in the lead up to sending the first connection request. But yes, that's where you would connect a Twitter account. If you don't have one, some of my clients don't, I wouldn't sweat it. It's not the most important thing to get on with right now. Okay, so once that's done, one more thing to note on this, sometimes as you're warming up your campaign, you will have a situation where LinkedIn will log you out of this account. Now that's not a problem usually. You've just got to log back in. Sometimes it'll ask you to kind of do a couple of extra verification things with where you got to click how many tractors there are in squares, et cetera, or traffic lights. I'm sure you've done those before. So just verify, pop them back in. That's regular when LinkedIn's algorithm is looking at your increased usage, because the idea is that at day one, you start at 25, and at day, I think around 15, you end up at 100, and then you got to keep it at 100. So we'll get into that in a second. So I'll get out of this and go into my other account. Welcome back. This is my actual live account. And now what you can see is the way that I have warmed up my account. The challenge with a lot of our users who come to us is they're not using their account in a way that a power user would use it, i.e. running 100 invites per day. So you can't just start day one and run 100 per day, or LinkedIn will penalize you and start to really kind of clamp down on that kind of usage. You've got to scale in over time. And usually the way you do it is to do an extra 5 invites every single day. You start at around 25 and head to 100. And that's usually what we recommend our clients to do, because you're going to be getting so many when you hit 100 that it's not going to be a problem missing those few. Everyone's really keen to get to 100 day one. It's not advisable, and we've seen many situations. And you can see here, actually, sometimes I get a little bit excited, and you know, I've been bounced a couple of times in here. So see how I went from 41 to 55, then 55 to 70, 70 to 85, and then 85, I ran it there for a couple of times because I had a couple of bumps, and then up to 100. And then 100, I've run it 100 every day since October. And that's really kind of the way you do it. Usually the way that we recommend is you start at 25, run it for 3 days at 25. On the 4th day, so day 4, you bump it to 40. So you move it 15 every 3 days. So day 1 is 25, day 4 is 40, day 7 is 55, day 10 is 70, day 14 is 85, and then 3 days after that, you hit 100. So around between day 16 to 18, you know, roughly you're taking about 20 days to hit 100. And then once you're at 100, you have to keep it there. And that's really essential to keep in mind. You need to be running these things at 100 every single day. If you drop back to 50 for a week or two, LinkedIn's going to go, oh, okay, it was just a blip. Okay, well, 50 is the average. You've got to keep it at 100 to ensure that LinkedIn's going to allow you to go at 100. So the way that we recommend doing that is usually by running multiple campaigns at the same time. So if we go to the campaigns tab here, you can see I've got 2 campaigns running at the same time. So they're both larger campaigns. Usually I'll line up the concept to grasp here is there's two types of campaigns that I would usually recommend you run. You can run tactical campaigns. So for a lot of our recruiters, that's focused where you run shorter term, more targeted campaigns. Or for when you've got somebody who's doing sort of high level sales, that's where you're targeting kind of high value targets. And then you have something more in the background that is reaching out to a larger kind of proportion of ideal profiles, but you haven't done the legwork to really kind of dig deeper. With recruiters, a lot of the time they'll put in their tactical recruitment campaigns. Let's say you have, say, 200 cybersecurity specialists that you're reaching out to. You would prioritize these guys number one. Let's say number one is cybersecurity. So all you got to do is move that to position number one and save that priority. And that's the first one that's being reached out to. And then number two, let's say that's another tactical employment campaign. So I'm recruiting for a position. Again, that's there. But let's say First Rex Monthly. Let's just assume that that's a reach out to clients. And I've basically put together a list of, I've done a nice Boolean and some good filters, and I've removed some of them, but it's a much larger search. So these two are 200 and this one's 2000. And really what you're looking to do is to ensure that the larger campaign is mopping up all the excess capacity. So on the days that you're sending messages to these guys, then the capacity is taken. But on the days it's not, it's running there in the background. So you're keeping it at 100. Just to show you how you would change the global limits. Change the numbers. So so you would set up a number of campaigns to run, like so, at 25. And then every 3 days, you just bump it to 40. Then you bump it to 55, then you bump it to 70, then you bump it to 85, then you bump it to 100. Now, when you're doing this, you want to keep everything in proportion. You want to make sure that everything's being sent at the same time. In mails, I will usually do in mails after I do everything else. So I'll run a campaign without in mails on, and then at the end of the campaign, I'll fire off an in mail to anybody who hasn't responded. So it gives you kind of another bite of the cherry at the end. Sequences, you can do a lot more than this. Usually I keep it at 100 with everything else. Oh, sorry, that's meant to be 100 like so. Usually I keep it at 100, but if I want to do an outreach to first degree, then I would bump it up to 200 or 250 just to ensure that there's enough capacity to run these campaigns and also to run any of your first degree outreach campaigns. So we'll get to that afterwards. One other thing to note with setup is if you want to connect it to your ATS or to an email finding / outreach tool, then you can do it within here. So usually I'll send new connections straight into my CRM, and there's an automation set up in my CRM to just email them automatically. So anyone who comes in, anyone who connects with you automatically has their email address attached 95% of the time, which means you don't have to go and find their email, which allows you to send it straight into your email tool. And then from there, it'll automatically fire off saying, hey, thanks for connecting. Would love to be in touch. Let's book a call, blah, blah, blah. It's a really simple way of doubling up your impact. And it works really well. It's super easy to set up that. The instructions are here if you need to find, oh, sorry, not here. Here, there are the instructions. Just follow those. If you're not familiar with Zapier, Zapier has lots of good tutorials on how to set up a webhook. And yeah, from there, you've just got to set up your automation in your CRM or your ATS. So basically, when you set up a template, every different campaign that you use that template with, when you change it in here, it changes across all of those different campaigns. So to start with, let's say, for example, I want to create a new invite template. So I'll say, let's say it's candidate Cyber 1. Great, so I can change that. Usually I'll throw in company name as well. Primarily because everybody's automation tool usually does hi first name, but when you throw in a company name, it adds a bit of impact to it. Came across your profile this morning, thought it'd be interesting to connect. Thanks, bang. Create private template like so. Perfect, it's there. And then you can just do the same with the sequence. Usually I'll do 1, 2, 3, and 4 messages, depending on how many. If you're doing a candidate campaign, I wouldn't recommend more than 3. So I would send a connection request. When they connect, send the first message day 1. Always send the first message day 1 in my experience, because it means you're striking while the iron's hot and you're following up with kind of more information. So if it's a candidate campaign, message 1 is almost always, here's more about the job, here's a link to my calendar, let's connect and book a call. And you can see some phenomenal returns on investment there. It's very quick to fill your calendar with calls. And then message 2 is kind of, hey, I didn't get your message then. Was everything all right? Was it of interest? And then message 3 is, hey, I don't want to harass you. Here's the last message. For clients, it's a different process, and we can get into that more often. More in later videos. But essentially, you want to be much less pushy and much more asking questions, getting a conversation started. It's more like going to a party. You're asking questions in the same way as you would in a social interaction with somebody you don't know. And then one more thing to note with InMail. InMail, with the new InMail template, it lets you put a subject in. I'll always put company name. Company name to me converts best. So I could say question about company name. And that means you get really good response rates, or better response rates than you would just sending a random InMail. That's my personal experience with that. So that should cover everything in terms of the basics. I'll do one more thing just to walk you through how to actually create a campaign. You click here to create a campaign, change the campaign name. Usually it's good to have some sort of numbering system. If you're doing a bunch of different job recs, then you want to put the job title and perhaps the date, et cetera, et cetera. And there's 2 sources that I would recommend. I don't usually use our in-app linked search. It's not quite as good as I think you can get from a Boolean search and filtered search. So either you have this filtered search like so, which means you paste the URL from LinkedIn in there, or you have profile links, which means you paste the profile links, or you can upload the CSV. But I find it's safer to just upload the profile URLs, because sometimes CSV, there's issues with other cells, et cetera, et cetera. One more thing to note, if you're doing outreach to people you're not first degree connected with, well, anybody really, always click automate data cleansing. It means that you don't have to go through your list and pick out any issues with names and job titles, et cetera, et cetera. It cleans the data for you. It just saves hours of time going through long lists. And if you're doing a first degree, if you're doing a second and third degree campaign, you always want to ignore first degree profiles. If you're doing something to people you're already connected to, then you would click that off, and you'd probably want to click both or one of these depending on what they do. So this one, anybody you've got in a previous campaign you want to reach out to again, you click that and it's included in there. Anybody who has already responded from a previous campaign will also be included. And then you click create campaign, and it will populate. Once it's populated, you can just go in here like so. This will tell you the campaign. You can't change these, although it lets you, it doesn't let you edit it anymore. You can't change this. All you can do is really change the name. That tells you kind of what you built, how it worked, and it gives you the filter URL too. This is the list of data here, which just gets you to lets you go through all of the different pieces of data when it loads any second now. So you can see that's locked in this campaign, and it gives you names and your relationship and status. And this tells you sort of at what point they are in the campaign. And that lets you tells you what status, et cetera, as well. Sorry, these are actions. You can view the profile log, which tells you exactly all the different things that's happened, or you can skip the profile, which means it's removed from the campaign. Schedule, pretty straightforward. Modules here. So this is where you would, okay, so I created a free InMail. Again, like I said, I wouldn't usually create an InMail until the end. No, maybe it was the profile invite. Yeah, so candidate cyber, you see it comes up there. Every campaign that I'm using this messaging for, it will pop up as so. Okay, that's it for now. Let's hop on to the next video, and we can work through actually setting up your first campaign.